Thank you for tuning in to this BP Leadership Lesson. You are about to hear from Bill Purvis and his wife, Miss Debbie, as they sit down and talk all about the topic, when working for you is not working for me. I hope you're ready. Now let's hear from Bill.
Hey, I got a lesson for you today I think you're going to enjoy. Here's the title: When Working for You is Not Working for Me. I thought it was a great title. The other day I was speaking with someone and they said that to me. They said something like that. It's just, I'm not, the person I'm dealing with, I just don't like working there. And I said, so it's not working for you, right? He said, yeah. And then as soon as he said it, I thought, I better write that down. And here's what I know. Not everyone is where they're fulfilled at in life or where they really want to be. And that's not saying they're ungrateful or unappreciative. We just want something different. Maybe you want something more fulfilling. You may be working somewhere or somebody working for you. And they're saying, I'd like more freedom. I'd like a different job. And sometimes you leave maybe because you reach the ceiling where you are. A lot of people went as far as they could at the place they were. And there comes a time they got to make that transition. And so our goal today is going to be to figure out how to do that, do it smoothly, and do it wisely. Sometimes people realize working for me is not working for you because it takes too much of their life away to work there. No time for their family, too much stress, health suffers, the rewards of the pay may not be great. And so there's a place in most all of our lives, if we live long enough, that we realize we got to make a change. I worked in a lot of jobs even before I got into ministry, hardwood floor business, service stations as a kid, Winn-Dixie grocery store, and heating and air conditioning, and a lot of other things. And so I went through all those things, and then I got in ministry, and I worked with 3 different pastors at 3 different, very different churches. And you remember those roles we had, and it was different. There were times that it was the best thing in the world, and there were times that I'd say, and if somebody would offer me a job, I'd sure take it. And so you may have felt that way, and you may have been in that position. Here's what I will say about where I was there, and as I lead into it, I learned a lot from every pastor and every experience. I did learn a lot from them, and I learned something different from every boss, from every pastor and every experience. I learned from one area where maybe administration. I learned from another about caring about people. I learned a lot from every one of them differently that I appreciate. I loved every boss and I appreciate the opportunities, and I respect them, and they'll always be in my debt forever. But God's will for me, just like God's will for you, may be that there comes something unique and a different opportunity, and you want to be ready if that door opens to be able to step into it without blowing up your past or where you've been. And there came a time for me, I had to literally say, working for you is not working for me. And I sensed my journey was going to change in advance. And I got to tell you, I was afraid in every case, because there's something about security where you are. There's something about, if I know where I'm at and everything's good right here, that's the known. And it's stepping into something else that may be the unknown, and that's the part that I may find myself saying, I'm not sure about. So here's what I do know. In my career now, I made 3 different moves that one was upwards and 2 were backwards, 2 were down. But that was okay. I was more afraid of disobeying than I was the other. In fact, in every one of the cases, I always took less salary. And so it was always a step back there. And yet at the same time, I always knew we could make a way to provide. And so I say that to you, that if I look back on my life, I can say at least all the moves I made were the right moves at the right time. And I don't regret a single one of them. They were part of building your resume. And so in your life, if you go through this time where you're saying, I got to make that change, I just tell you that may be for you something that you'd want to write notes about today and listen from. Now the Bible's going to give us a great example of somebody who literally could say, working for you is not working for me. Let me tell you who he is. His name is David. David worked under Saul. Now King David, that great king of Israel, he didn't start at the top. He was once a little shepherd boy. He was the least in his family. His own father didn't see potential in him, and his brothers didn't see greatness in him. So he had no family support. And some of you are in that situation. I know we know a lot of people that basically they're kind of all alone when it comes to making their career, making their move. They They would always say, if I could get encouragement from one family member. Somebody recently told us that they've got a kid that is doing phenomenal. And all the people around that child is saying, if his mother and father would just congratulate him one time, just one time, say something good or positive. And you watch that kid working his heart out. He's 16 years of age, doing the very best he can. And any of us would be proud to be the parent. And his parents, for whatever reason, refuse to give the blessing. And it just saddens us because we say, you got gold. You got gold. Don't hurt the kid. And so they didn't have the family support. You may have been there. David was there. In fact, sometimes your family may be your biggest discouragers. And yet, while his family and his friends and all that didn't support him, God saw David. He saw his heart. And that was really the secret. He knows about us what no one else really can see. And God had a plan for him, whether anybody else did or not, or whether David did. And so I think that God saw a young man that would always feel that he was blessed more than he deserved. And David was humble about that. But God saw in him two things. He saw that he was faithful and he was grateful. And those are two of the things that if you can apply those in your life, be faithful to what you do. It's not necessarily our ability that's going to take you to the top. It's your availability. It's your dependability. And so David had that, but he was also grateful. If you read through the Psalms, you'll find most of the Psalms are Psalms about thanks. And here's a guy who really could complain. He had a lot of negative coming his way, but he spent a lot of time being grateful. He worked for a very hard boss. His boss was King Saul. Saul was the guy that none of us would want to work for. He was the king of Israel. He was very paranoid. He was turf protective. He was jealous of David getting any accolades or praise from other people. Fact is that when David would do his best around Saul, it didn't turn out so well for David. He got, on one occasion, on two occasions really, he had a spear thrown at him just because other people were praising him, and Saul was jealous. He had mood swings like you wouldn't believe, and they'd come on so quick. If you ever worked for somebody like that, you know that feeling. You'd say, I thought today was going to be a good day, and here they were. I worked for one boss that one day I was in his office, and by the way, when I decided working for you is not working for me, here was the act. Something happened, and I dropped the ball. It wasn't a big thing. It was just a miscommunication. And I'll never forget, he reached over and put his arm on his desk and raked everything on his desk off on the floor. I mean, it just broke and shattered. And then he looked at me with anger, and he said something that was frustrating. And I realized then, I don't want to do this. Maybe other people that have worked here have done this all the time, but I'm just not one of those to do that. I don't respond that way. I gave my best, but I knew then, okay, it's kind of time to start planning on being prepared when God opened that door. So working for him was not working for me, but same thing that David saw. David was loyal. He was faithful. He did no wrong. David was loved by the people, but Saul was jealous. And I remind you of this. I've said it many times, but it's very hard to have a relationship with a jealous person. The Bible says, who can stand before jealousy? And the meaning of that is, jealousy is one of those things, if somebody gets jealous, it will eat them up, and they'll make things that are not there. They will find ways to validate the way they feel. And I would just encourage you, watch that in your life for yourself as well. Now, everyone, have you ever worked for somebody that you knew that you worked for them, but they needed you, but they didn't really want you? That you had a skill that you provided for that they had to have. At the same time, you knew that if you didn't have that skill, you probably wouldn't have the relationship or the job with them. And so when Saul was throwing spears at David, David learned, okay, I'm going to have to forgive him, but I'm going to have to move on because working for him is not working for me. Now here's the key. How did David respond? How do we respond when working for them is not working for us? Well, here's what he did. Number one, he showed honor. In spite of the fact that he was treated with dishonor and anger, he showed honor. We talk about honor a lot. We try to raise our kids that way to say, honor is one of those things that if you give it, you'll get it back.
I believe that.
Yeah, and I believe, we talk about teachers. I mean, I know your philosophy of teachers. You always said, that, support your kids, but respect your teachers.
Honoring even if you don't agree with them.
Yeah, and we weren't never going to be that parent that said, that mean old teacher. I think those teachers have worked so hard and so long. They don't deserve that, and sometimes the kid slants it so they're the victim anyway. So be careful about that. But the fact is David was wise. He showed honor in spite of the way he was treated, and even though Saul despised him, David was respectful and loving back to Saul. What I like about David is he didn't play the victim game. I mean, he never said, I'm the poor old victim and mean old Saul. David never played the victim card. He never undermined Saul behind his back. He didn't go out among other people and say, let me tell you how mean that king is. I know the real king. He just never did it. And then he didn't seek to return harm even when he had opportunities to do it. I mean, Saul's throwing spears at David. David was pretty good with a spear. David was good with a sling. David could have given back as much as he got. But he was willing to say, I'll let that go. I'm going to give you that one. And he was willing to do that, which is very wise. And I believe this, God can greatly use a person when they choose to take the high road. And it's not easy, but I think that's when the blessing and the favor comes. And so I say this, when you leave a place, by the way, and we'll cover that in a moment, but when you leave a place, you'll always have some people around there that are bottom feeders, and they'll approach you and they'll kind of say, well, now, what's the real reason? I remember when I left a situation and I stood up and told everybody, God led me to go to this particular place, and I knew it. And then several of those people approached me afterwards and said, well, now, Brother Bill, you can tell me what's the real reason. And they're bottom feeders. They're looking for dirt. They're hoping to find something negative. And I was offended because I thought I just told you the reason. You think I lied to you? You think I didn't tell you the truth? Well, I told you the truth. I said I'm leaving because God led me. And so it made me probably more offended at them for questioning why I told them what I told them, because it was true. And so David showed honor. That's the first way. The second thing is this: do your best while you're there. If you know you're going to leave, suppose you know you're going to leave in 3 months and you got a date set and you just put that date on the calendar, I still believe you ought to work as hard up until that day as you did the first day you got there, because you're being paid for that day. So give the very best you can while you're there. And David could have said, hey, look, they don't respect me. I do all the heavy lifting around here. Every time there's an army, they send me out front. I kill all the enemies. I come back with the scalps and give them to Saul. War breaks out. I'm the main guy. And yet, look how they treat me. So I tell you what, I'm pulling back. And from now on, I'm not giving my best until I'm out. David didn't do it. He never even said they'll miss me when I'm gone. He basically said, I'm going to leave things so well that when I walk away, at least I can live with my conscience. I use an illustration for this, and Debbie, you remember when I did it, but when Brent was first stepping in as pastor, and we really realized he was stepping into that lead role, I sat down and took a notepad, and you saw some of it. I said, okay, I'm going to write some things down that need to be changed internally at the church. The bigger church didn't know, but I've got to make some changes so that when he comes in, he will be able to hit the ground and run, and he won't have all these barriers. And I had one or two personalities, and you probably have it in your work as well. I had one or two power-tripping people that were on some boards, and I could deal with them. I always did. It was not an issue to me. I lived with it and I understood. They were kind of my deal, and we had some relationships, sometimes combative behind the closed doors, but I didn't want my son to have that. And I thought, okay, I gotta go ahead and slay my giants and don't leave them for him. And if I don't do that now, if I don't leave it better for him, he's got to come in and fight my giants. And I would have wanted the person that I came in behind to have done that. I don't want him to leave me a mess. So I wrote the names down of some people and boards that needed to change. And one by one, over about a month, I made strategic changes. Now, most of them accepted it. One or two got mad and left the church and hated me after that, after I'd given them years of everything good. And they were just into the power. But I just knew it was the right thing to do. And so I say to you, if you will leave your work better than you found it, leave it so that the person coming behind you can build on it. That's a way that you can walk away with clear hands and a good conscience. And you really don't want to say, it fell apart when I left. Okay, I got to tell you, if even at Cascade, because most of us are familiar with the role we changed here, it's doing better now than it did under me, and I'm grateful. I can't tell you how much I celebrate, and that would be, I promise you, you know my heart, that would be the same even if it wasn't my son. Yeah. If that were anyone else, if that was somebody I didn't even know and they took that role and did better, I would be the first person to cheerlead them, because it doesn't make me look better to put them down. You know, if you want to have the biggest building in town, you can do it one way. You can go knock down everybody else's building. Then you got the tallest building in town. But that's not the way to do it. What you want to do is learn from them and build bigger and build better. And so leave things in a way that the next person can come in and say, wow, they made a great work. I'll tell you a joke I heard years ago that I thought was hilarious about that. There was this CEO and he was retiring. So he told his new replacement, he said, I've written you 3 letters and I put those letters in your drawer. And if you ever come a time when you're leading this company that things get really bad and you don't know where to turn, go open that drawer and pull out letter number 1. I've marked them for you. And read that letter to the people. And so the guy found himself a year later in a position where he was under fire. They had his head on the chopping block. He had nowhere to turn. But he remembered what the predecessor had told him. So he went in and opened the drawer and he opened up the letter, and here's what it read. It read, blame the problem on your predecessor. Tell him that you're cleaning house. Tell him that he didn't finish the work and that you've got to do this for now. So he got up and read the letter. I'd love to tell you, it's my fault, but it's not. It's my predecessor's fault. He left me a mess and I'm cleaning it up. And you know what it did? It bought him some time. The people said, oh, okay, and it bought him time. And then about a year later, he got in another mess, and this time it was as bad. So now he decides, I better go get letter number 2. So he goes and he opens the drawer, pulls out letter number 2, and he reads that one. Now this one he says, I'm the CEO. And he says, and tell the people, I take the blame, the full blame. I own every bit of it. It's all my fault. And he did it, and the people received him, forgave him, and it all died down. And then a year later, he hits the 3rd time. Trouble comes, he don't know where to go, but he's got 1 letter left. He goes in, opens that drawer and reads it, and this letter reads like this. Apparently, you've already gone through letter number 1, letter number 2. You've already given me the blame, then you've taken the blame. My suggestion now is you sit down at the desk like I did one day, and you write 3 letters. And what he's saying is, you're out the door now, you're gone. So leave this for the one coming behind you. I always thought that's probably a wise advice to do. Here's the key. When I'm leaving, I want to do this, and I want to make also, number 3, a clean break. Make a clean break. How you walk out one door determines how God opens the next. And your next opportunity may be contingent upon how you left the last place. And so you don't want to leave it messy. You don't want to leave it in disarray. And so make sure that you do it right. When one day David was being hunted and chased down by Saul, and he was hiding in a cave. Saul and his army were right behind him. And here's a crazy situation. David is running from Saul, and David is afraid that he's going to die. Saul's got his army looking. David's in a particular cave, and all of a sudden Saul gets off of his horse and tells his men, I've got to go. The Bible says that he said, I want to go relieve myself. He had to go to the restroom. So he looks at a cave, and he walks into the cave by himself, and he goes to use the restroom in his journey to chase David. What he doesn't know is in the very cave he goes into is David and his men who are hiding. Those men now look at David and they nudge him and they say, hey, isn't God good? They said, hey, Saul has been delivered into your hand right now. Your enemy is right here. All you got to do is kill him. You can kill him and you can put the crown on, walk out there, and those men get a new king. Problem solved. And they were pushing him to do it. You can step into that role, David. This is your opportunity. And I would say be cautious, because even though his friends saw that as his advancement for his career, David knew it wasn't his time to do that. It was a test. It was a test from God to check his heart. Was he going to elbow his way to the top? Was he going to cut others down to get where he needed to be? Was he going to position himself by pushing Saul out? And I like what David did. The Bible says David took out his sword And while Saul apparently had taken off his robe and laid it down while he was relieving himself, David cut off a piece of his sword, of his robe with his sword. And when he cut it off, David kept it, and Saul went outside. And when Saul got out with his men and started to leave, he got down to the valley, and David walked out. Now, David's men were mad at David. You should have killed him. You should have cut his throat. Why did you not do that? But David refused to take it himself. He refused to retaliate. He refused to get somewhere that God hadn't yet put him. And so David hollers out across the valley to Saul. He says, "Hey, Saul." And Saul looks up at him, and there's the one I'm chasing. There's David. And Saul and his army turn to him, and then David holds up a piece of that robe. And he says, "Saul, you've tried to hurt me. You've tried to kill me. Guess what? You were within inches of me a moment ago. I took a piece of your robe to show you how easy it would have been for me to take your life, but I chose not to." Now, when he did that, it broke Saul's heart for a moment, stirred his conscience. The Bible says Saul said, "David, you're a better man than I am. And I know that one day God will bless you and God will go before you." And so Saul's eyes were open at that moment. Now, you know what was funny? While Saul was ashamed and he felt that, David was hurt that he even had to do that. He didn't want to cut his robe. He didn't want to do anything to hurt Saul. He wished the event had never happened. He wanted to walk away without having the boss chase him down and try to kill him. Later, David would ascend to the throne. He'd be great. He'd be a wonderful king. And you know what I know? I believe the reason God blessed him is because David got rid of the anger and the bitterness and all of that during that time that he was on the run from Saul. I think when he kept forgiving Saul, he was cleaning his own heart. God was making him ready to teach the people and lead the people, and he was doing it through that adversity. And David, as a result, began to draw great people. In fact, David drew loyal people around him. If you look at in the army that he had, they were loyal people. And the reason is because like attracts like. Like attracts like. I got in trouble one time and I've been in trouble a lot of times for speaking, but when I was on a church staff one time, I remember that in a staff meeting, the music director, and he was having some problems with his choir. And the choir and the music, just there was a lot of conflict. And somewhere in that staff meeting, he turned around and said, "I wish I had a choir that had a heart like all the people that worked with Bill." I was a youth pastor. He said, "He's got the greatest leaders in this church." He said, "And they're loyal to him." And he said, and I got to tell you, he's got the best group that I've ever seen, and I wish I had them in the choir. And the pastor turned to me. He said, "I've noticed that. Bill, what's the difference?" He said, "Why do you think you've drawn those?" And I said, I'd rather not say. He said, "Bill, I'm telling you, I want you to say." And I knew it's going to be bad. And I said, "Pastor, this is not a conversation that we ought to have here." And he looked at me and said, "You know the answer, and I want to know, and I want to know right now." And he was pretty firm. So I said, "Okay." And I'm going to tell you. I said, "Here's why." I said, "That music guy you got right here," I called his name. I said, "He's the most disloyal to you, Pastor, of anybody in this room." I said, "He's never defended you behind your back. You've never preached a sermon he didn't go out and critique. And no matter what you say, he's too long, he's too short, he said this word wrong, he don't give me enough time for my performance." And I said, "He's so disloyal to you. And now he's got this real wonder and bamboozled why his choir is disloyal to him." Like gets like. And I said, "Pastor, you won't find one person in this church that'll say I've ever said one thing negative about you behind your back." And that's why I have an entire group of people that are loyal to me. See, you draw what you are, not what you want, okay? So if you want a certain thing, you got to be that thing to get what you want, because that's what you draw. Now, David drew it that way. So I say, when you go in that situation, play the long game. How do I want to live in the long run with this? And the big picture of mine is I want to look back 20 years and say, when I was at that situation and I left that job, I did it right. Sometimes the emotions of the moment, the fear or the need for validation may tempt you to do some things or say some things in that moment that you might regret later. So be very careful. I always make this rule, it's kind of the 24-hour rule. I always say to myself, wait and give me time to think before I respond. Because immediately I may say something that I would regret or put gas on the fire. And so give me that time. I encourage you to do this, by the way. Sometimes write a letter. You know, somebody really gets ugly to you, write the meanest letter back you ever want to write. I just put it all down. Tell them off. And then when you get through, read the letter, then tear it up. Don't let anybody see it. Just know you got it out of your system. But be careful. Wait that time. And I say to you, I can literally say with my own conscience, having left the 3 bosses that I left at one time, working with them wasn't working for me, but I really know this. 40 years later, not one of them has ever said truthfully that I would ever be unfriendly to them or was ever negative to them or hurt them or disloyal. We have a good relationship to this day, highly respectful. And we wouldn't have had it, I think, if one of us had decided to make an enemy. Every one of them added value to my life, and I'm where I am because of them. And I hope if you know you're working for a boss and it's not working for you, they've added some value. Maybe they've taught you what not to do. But for some reason, you've learned some things. And if you'll write down what you've learned, you grow through that and you'll be a better person. And so don't tear up the road behind you. Make sure the seeds you sow are going to be seeds you can live with when they grow. Now, we've all been shaped by the people in our life, the experiences we've had. We've all been shaped by what we went through. And everything we go through is going to change us. It will change you in some way or another. And you want to try to change as it goes through in a way that you become more mature and wiser with a lot more grace. So now here's the question too. When is it time to leave? When is it definitely time to leave? I'll give you a couple of answers. One is, I think when you privately think and publicly say to anyone anything negative about your supervisor or boss, I think that's time to go. You know, when you publicly say it at that moment, you know, I'll tell you who did that. Absalom, David's son, did that to David. He said, if I were the king, this is what I would do. If I were the king, I would do differently than my father did. And when he did that, he let rebellion begin to grow in his heart, and then others around him who were rebels, they came along with him. So how do you leave? Here's the key. You leave alone. You don't leave in a group. You leave alone. David could have taken a lot of people with him. He could have said, hey, anybody else out here that hates working for this mood-swinging guy, this paranoid idiot, anybody else want to go with me? He could have got a group and they could have went down the road and started. But David said, no, I'm going to leave alone. Because if I leave in a group, I don't know if God's in that or not. I mean, I may be trusting the group. We're all going together. That's why I'm really concerned sometimes when I see an employee leave a business and he takes all the clients with him. I always say, well, no, that's not ethical. You know, they say sometimes, well, he doesn't have any business ethics. Let me tell you, there's really no such thing as business ethics. It's just ethics. You know, ethics are with you whether you're at home or in a business or wherever. It's always there. And so there's not a difference there. And when you go alone, now you're leaning on God. Now you're trusting God. You're not saying we in the group are here and we can't fail. You're dependent on God. So that way you know God's leading you, and that's the greatest way to leave. And David did that. David left alone, basically saying, I am trying to trust God with all I have. So he didn't do this. He didn't worry about his reputation, and you shouldn't. By the way, our reputation is what people think of us, okay? Our character is what we know we are. And you got to keep that in check, because your reputation will change. When somebody wants to ruin your reputation or something, who cares? You know what the Bible says about Jesus? He made himself of no reputation. Now, I say this about my reputation if it helps. I'm not as good as most of you think I am. I mean, I'm really not. If we spent 4 or 5 hours together, you'd be going, you know, I'm glad God's with him, because he really, you know, he's as human as all of us, and I am. I get impatient in lines. I tell you, I always break that 10 items or less line at the grocery store. I mean, they call me out all the time. And I've been called out more. I got called out, I guess, 4 times the other day. This mask thing now is the new law. You know, if they were writing police tickets for that, well, I'd have a stack of them. The other day I went up to order something, to buy something. The lady said, put your mask up, it's falling. You know, I didn't get offended and think, well, I'm leaving. I was hungry. So I pulled it up, how's this? And I was smiling underneath. Now, you know, the key is in your life, don't worry about your reputation, what other people think, what they do, what they say. That's okay. David realized that even when he stepped away, that he wasn't going to be necessarily the most respected. In fact, by the way, When David stepped away, he was at an all-time low in respect among many of the people. He'd gone from living in a castle to now living in a cave, and he was running, and yet he still had a pure heart. I can imagine the mothers and parents saying to their kids, in their eyes, they were thinking, listen, child, you need to learn to play office politics. This David didn't do that. David didn't play office politics like he should have, or he'd still be in the castle. So you need to learn to do that. And I think, they'll probably say, don't be like the giant killer David. He just lost his career. And he's a falling star. He's on his way down. Now let me tell you how I translate that. I oftentimes wonder when a parent's more concerned about you just be popular at school. We used to know that. We'd have people come to us that had kids the same age, and they'd say, all we want is our child to be popular. That doesn't, what does that do? And by the way, my sweetie here you were the homecoming queen. And that must make me homecoming queen or something. I didn't even have a homecoming. I didn't graduate. So, the reputation didn't mean anything. I mean, you got to learn to say, what does that matter? I mean, that's what they think. I'm not as good as they think, and here's the good. I'm not as bad as my critics think. So look at yourself. You're not as good as some think. You're not as bad. You're just who you are. You may have good days and bad days, but just be you wherever you are. Now, here's the key. What if you're the boss? What if you're the boss and maybe somebody today says, I just want to tell you something. I was listening to BPL Leadership a while ago and the podcast, and I heard that title, When Working for You is Not Working for Me. And boss, I just want to tell you, he said what I'm thinking. I'm not working for you. I'm out. I'm quitting. What if somebody comes to you and you're the employer, you're the supervisor, you're the manager, and they come to you and say, working for you is not working for me. What do you do now? My suggestion is this. Can you allow people to leave and bless them? Can you allow them to leave and wish them well? Saul couldn't do that. Saul thought about David night and day. He was obsessed with him. He was afraid he was going to succeed. He wanted to destroy him. Saul thought, if David's dead, I'll look better. And so that was Saul's goal in his life. Now, I believe this. It's not right to try to destroy your former employee. I can say this, and I probably have this some in my life. Some of the employees I worked for, I knew some of their weaknesses. I knew some of their shortcomings. I knew some of the things that I knew would really hurt them. And yet I knew that it would never be right to go out and let that out and tell that, because they were just like me, flawed. And when I got in that position one day, because I hadn't been where they were, I might make some of the same decisions and I might do things the same way. And so it's never right to destroy a former employee's reputation. It's also not right if you're the former employee to intentionally undermine your employer. And so remember this. When working for you is not working for me, it can be the best opportunity, if you do it right, to soar to another level in your life. You can fast track your life to a bad future, or you can put it on a right path and go so far that even those you once worked for would look back one day and say, I knew them when. And that's the goal. The goal is our goal now. In fact, as I'm older, the biggest joy I get when I come to church and worship, it's one of the best things I do every week. It helps me worship. I look all around the building and I see people that I was privileged to be in their life at a time, or I look at all those young people up on a stage singing, and a lot of times I say, I remember when their family came to God, and now look at them, and many of them have done their weddings, and what voices and talents and skills. And I feel like the Bible calls it like a spiritual father. And for some of you, I am your spiritual father. And for some of those are my spiritual grandkids. And I look at them and I get into worship, no matter what the song is, looking at them and thinking, I knew them when. Some of them I knew when I held them in my hands as a little baby and dedicated them for the parents. And to think they grew up now and look at them. They've moved on with their life and done fantastic. And those are some of the greatest blessings. And so even if you have an employee that says, working for you is not working for me and I've got to leave, give them the blessing, wish them the best if possible. And when they leave, you make it in your mind to say, I want to keep check of them occasionally. And I want to always be able to tell somebody when I hear how well they're doing, hey, I'm more proud than anybody because I knew them when. So that's what you do when working for you is not working for me. Hope that was a help to you. I enjoyed putting it together. I think you enjoyed it, didn't you?
It was great.
Oh, good, good. That's what I want to know. Because she'll tell me the truth. I can tell you right now. She would have told me right now, you need to redo that and apologize to everybody. So thank you for
That's
that.
fabulous.
Thank you, Debbie. And thank every one of you. I'm so grateful that you're here. And I appreciate you more than I do. And next month, we will be meeting live at the Trade Center for breakfast. And I can't wait for that. That's gonna be something I'm glad of.
I hope you enjoyed this BP leadership lesson with Bill Purvis. And if you would like to see Bill Purvis live at one of our monthly BP Leadership breakfasts in the Columbus, Georgia area, make sure you go to our website, bpleadership.com, click the events tab at the top of the page, and sign up for which event that you would like to attend in the future. We hope to see you there, and as always, remember that this is where real leaders are made.